Claro, seguiu roteiro em inglês. Camilla was 28 years old and worked as an elementary school teacher at a small neighborhood school. She wasn't rich, she didn't come from a famous family, but she had something money could never buy: endless patience and a dignity that no one, until that day, had managed to break. She had been married for 3 years to Mateo, the only son of Eleonora Vasconcelos, a woman who had spent her life building a fortune in real estate, and who had never, not even for a second, accepted that her son had married a public school teacher. That night was Eleonora's 70th birthday celebration. The family mansion, located in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, glowed under golden lights. They had hired a full orchestra. Waiters moved through the room, carrying trays of French champagne. More than 50 guests, businessmen, politicians, old high society families, chatted and laughed beneath crystal chandeliers. Camilla had arrived early to help with the final details, as she always did. She wore a navy blue dress, simple but elegant, which she had bought with her own savings. To her, that dress was special. To Eleonora, it would be the perfect target. "Darling," Eleonora said, raising her voice just enough for several nearby guests to turn around. "Did you buy that dress at a discount store, or did you inherit it from your mother?" A few discreet laughs could be heard among the guests. Camilla felt heat rise up her neck, but she smiled. "I like it, Eleonora. It's comfortable," she answered calmly. "Comfortable," Eleonora repeated, savouring the word as if it were an insult. "How nice that at least something about you is comfortable, because elegance is definitely not your strength." Mateo, who was a few feet away talking to some of his mother's business associates, didn't hear anything. Camilla looked toward on him, searching for an anchor, but decided not to interrupt him. She didn't want to make a scene. She never wanted to make a scene. The party continued. Then came the moment for speeches. Eleonora took the microphone, thanked her guests, spoke about her achievements, her real estate empire, and the generations of her family who had built this country through serious work, not on a teacher's salary. The phrase landed on Camilla like a silent slap. She was standing beside the appetizer table. Several guests glanced at her from the corners of their eyes. She lowered her gaze and tightened her grip around the glass in her hand. But Eleonora wasn't finished. "And I also want to take this opportunity," she continued, looking directly at Camilla with a smile that never reached her eyes, "to thank those who, even though they don't accomplish much in life, at least try to stand beside those who do." The silence that followed was thick. Some guests laughed nervously, others simply looked away, uncomfortable. Camilla felt the floor shift beneath her feet, but she didn't shed a single tear. She placed her glass on the table, excused herself quietly, and walked toward the garden, where the cool night air might, at least for a few minutes, calm the fire burning in her chest. Before reaching the garden door, she heard 2 guests talking near the coat room, unaware of her presence. "Poor girl," said an older woman wearing a pearl necklace that probably cost more than Camilla's annual salary. "I don't know how she puts up with it. If I were her, I would have left years ago." "She has nowhere to go," the other woman replied, lowering her voice. "Without the Vasconcelos name, what does she really have?" Camilla pressed her lips together and kept walking, pretending she hadn't heard anything. She was already used to people talking about her as if she were invisible, as if her value depended entirely on the man she had married. What those women could never imagine was that, at that very moment, Camilla had an unread notification on her phone from her financial advisor, marked urgent, about a transaction that would completely change that narrative. She didn't know that same night, her life and Eleonora's was about to change forever. In the garden, while trying to calm herself, she heard footsteps on the gravel. It was Renata, Mateo's younger sister, the only person in that family who had always treated her with genuine kindness. "Don't listen to her," Renata said, offering her a tissue that Camilla didn't need because she still wasn't crying. "My mother has spent her whole life believing that people's value is measured by bank accounts. It's exhausting, I know." "I'm fine," Camilla replied. And in part it was true. What she felt wasn't exactly sadness. It was something closer to exhaustion. The exhaustion of 3 years of comments disguised as jokes, superior looks at every family dinner, and the feeling that no matter how hard she tried, she would never be enough for a woman who only respected money and surnames. "One day she'll realise how wrong she is," Renata said, gently squeezing her arm. Camilla smiled, grateful. Without yet knowing how soon and in what unexpected way those words would become reality, they returned to the ballroom together a few minutes later. The party continued as if nothing had happened, as always happened in that world where cruelty dressed itself up as elegance and no one dared to point out the obvious. What no one at that party knew, not even Matteo really, was who Camilla had been before becoming an elementary school teacher. The daughter of a civil engineer and a librarian, Camilla had grown up in a modest home filled with books. Since childhood, she had stood out for her exceptional memory and astonishing ability with numbers. At 17, she won a full scholarship to study economics at one of the most prestigious universities in the country. During those years, she worked as a research assistant for a renowned economist who would later become an advisor to several international investment funds. Camilla wrote reports, analysed markets, and detected opportunities that less trained eyes missed. Her mentor, impressed, offered her a permanent position with a salary most of her classmates could only dream of earning before turning 30. But instead of accepting, Camilla chose a different path. Her mother had become seriously ill, a cancer diagnosis that arrived like a storm without warning, and Camilla wanted to stay close, in her city, caring for her personally, instead of delegating that responsibility to hired nurses, as so many wealthy families did. She gave up major opportunities in international finance and became a teacher, not because she couldn't do more, but because she chose to prioritise what truly mattered to her. "Aren't you afraid of wasting your talent?" her mother had asked one night, weak but lucid, from her hospital bed. "I'm not wasting anything, Mum," Camilla answered then. "I'm choosing what's truly worth it. Money will still be there. You won't." Her mother passed away 8 months later, peacefully, surrounded by her family, knowing that her daughter had chosen love over ambition. Camilla never regretted that decision, not for a single day. However, she never stopped investing. With patience and discipline, she had taken the small savings inherited from her grandfather and multiplied them year after year in the stock market. Every night, after grading assignments from her 8-year-old students, she studied financial reports with the same dedication she once used to solve calculus exams. No one knew, not even Matteo. She never bragged about anything, because to her, money was never a way to define her identity, but simply another silent and discreet tool for building long-term security. What Eleonora also didn't know was something much more important. Just 2 months earlier, the investment fund where Camilla had placed her savings, a small but extremely well-managed fund called Aurelia Capital, had quietly and discreetly acquired a majority stake in a company that was facing serious financial trouble. That company was called Vasconcelos Real Estate Developments, the same company Eleonora had inherited from her father, the same one that largely supported the entire family's empire and social prestige. Camilla had not deliberately sought that out. Her investment fund had simply detected an opportunity, a company with valuable assets, but poor management, hidden debts, and erratic decisions made by a director who trusted her surname more than her numbers. Camilla, as part of the minority investment committee that contributed capital, had approved the deal without knowing at the time the personal connection it would have to her own life. Until that night, at that party, she hadn't fully made the connection either. It was only when she heard one of Eleonora's business partners quietly mention the new investors who are demanding a complete restructuring of the company that everything clicked in her mind like pieces of a puzzle. Camilla remained in the garden for nearly 15 minutes, breathing deeply, pulling herself together. When she finally decided to return to the ballroom, she heard a conversation that stopped her cold, hidden behind stone columns. "Eleonora, you need to understand the seriousness of the situation," said an older man, his voice tense. "The fund's new majority shareholders are not willing to continue financing the losses. They want a meeting with the board this week. If no agreement is reached, they could force your removal from the presidency." "That's absurd," Eleonora replied, her voice cracking with fury, and for the first time in a long while, fear as well. "My father founded that company. No one is going to remove me from it." "You no longer make the rules, Eleonora. The rules are made by whoever has the capital. And right now, that fund has more decision-making power than you." A chill ran down Camilla's spine. Not from triumph. Not yet. But from the magnitude of what she was beginning to understand. She decided not to say anything that night. She returned discreetly to the party, smiled when necessary, helped collect a few glasses, and at 11 o'clock went home with Matteo, who still suspected absolutely nothing about what had happened. Not with his mother, not with the insult toward his wife, and not with the storm that was approaching. The next day, Camilla called her advisor at the investment fund. "I need complete information on the restructuring of Vasconcelos real estate developments," she said, with the firm voice of someone who no longer needed to hide anything. "And I want to know whether, as part of the committee, I have a say in the final decision regarding the outgoing president." "You do," the advisor replied. "In fact, given your percentage of participation, your vote is decisive." That same afternoon, Camilla requested a formal meeting with the company's board of directors, not as Matteo Vasconcelos' wife, not as the teacher everyone at that party had seen as unimportant, but as Camilla Restrepo, investor and member of the Aurelia Capital Fund Committee. That night, sitting in her small home office, surrounded by folders, financial statements and quarterly reports, Matteo found her working late. "Everything okay?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe, not fully understanding why his normally calm wife was reviewing corporate documents with such intensity. "Everything's fine," Camilla replied, without looking up from the document in her hands. "I'm just finishing an analysis for work." She didn't lie, but she didn't tell the whole truth either. She wanted Matteo to find out the same way everyone else would, in that boardroom, with the facts on the table, without filters or prior explanations that could soften the blow for his mother. Matteo nodded, kissed her forehead and went to sleep, suspecting absolutely nothing. The boardroom of Vasconcelos Real Estate Developments was exactly as Camilla had imagined it. Marble walls, a long mahogany table, portraits of the founders watching from the walls like silent judges. Eleonora entered with her usual posture, head held high, convinced that this was just another negotiation that would end in her favour, as always. She sat at the head of the table, her usual place, and waited for the representatives of the investment fund to begin their presentation. When the door opened and Camilla walked in, dressed in a dark grey tailored suit, her hair pulled back, a folder under her arm, Eleonora let out a short, incredulous laugh. "What is she doing here?" she asked, looking at her lawyer. "Did she come to bring coffee?" No one answered. The silence in the room grew heavy. Camilla sat at the other end of the table, calmly opened her folder, and began to speak. "Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Camilla Restrepo. I am a member of the investment committee of Aurelia Capital, the fund that currently owns 42% of this company's shares, and, following the latest acquisition round, holds veto power over any structural decision made by the board." Eleonora stared at her, as if the words were taking too long to reach her, as if her brain refused to process what she was hearing. "That's impossible," she finally said. "You are my son's wife. You are a teacher." "I am both," Camilla replied, without raising her voice because she didn't need to. "And I am also an economist who graduated with honours, a former international markets analyst, and an active investor for the past 9 years. I chose not to talk about that at family gatherings because it never seemed relevant. Until today." "This has to be a mistake," Eleonora insisted, turning toward her lawyer with an urgency bordering on desperation. "Verify this right now. There must be some confusion with the names, some administrative error." Eleonora's lawyer quickly reviewed the documents Camilla had distributed, turning the pages with increasingly tense fingers. His face grew pale as he continued. "It is correct," he finally confirmed, speaking to Eleonora in a low voice, almost as if he didn't want the rest of the room to hear. Mrs. Restrepo, under her maiden name, Camilla Restrepo Aguilar, has been listed as an active member of Aurelia Capital's investment committee for 4 years, and Aurelia Capital, after last month's acquisition, has the legal authority to vote on this decision. Eleonora fell silent. For the first time in her life, a room full of men in suits was not waiting for her words. They were waiting for Camilla's. She looked around, searching for a face that would support her, an ally who could reverse what was happening. But all she found were evasive glances and folders that everyone suddenly seemed very eager to review. "The proposal on the table," Camilla continued, ignoring the tension growing in the room, "is a complete restructuring of executive leadership, given the financial deterioration of the past 3 years under current management. Accumulated losses exceed 11 million, mainly due to investments in land that never obtained the necessary permits and expansion into 3 cities without proper market studies. The fund has 2 possible paths. The first, force an immediate removal from the presidency and liquidate assets to recover value quickly, which would result in mass layoffs and the sale of the corporate building. The second, keep the current leadership under strict supervision, with a 24-month recovery plan, subject to verifiable quarterly results. Eleonora swallowed hard. For the first time in a long while, she had no insult prepared, no clever phrase. She only had fear, a genuine fear she had not felt since many years earlier, when she had inherited that same company from a demanding father who never believed she could run it alone. "And which one are you going to choose?" she asked, her voice much smaller than it had been the night before, almost inaudible to the rest of the room. Camilla slowly closed the folder and looked her mother-in-law directly in the eyes. The wall clock at the opposite end of the boardroom marked 3:20 in the afternoon. No one in that room moved. "I am going to vote for the second option," Camilla said, "the opportunity for restructuring. Not because I care about protecting you, Eleonora, but because firing hundreds of employees who are not responsible for your management mistakes would be unfair. This company gives work to many people who, unlike you, never had the privilege of humiliating anyone at a party." The room remained completely silent. Eleonora lowered her gaze, something she had never done in front of another person in all her 70 years of life. "But," Camilla continued, "there are conditions. First, you will leave the executive presidency immediately and move into an honorary role with no operational decision-making power. Second, a professional management team will be hired, chosen by the committee, without family interference. And third, and this one is personal, not corporate, you will never again refer to me, or to anyone else, by their profession or their background, as if that defines their value as a human being. Not for me, for all the people you have probably already treated this way, and who never had the power to answer back." Eleonora said nothing. She couldn't. Tears, which she never allowed anyone to see, began to form in her eyes. She slowly nodded once, accepting the terms without needing any additional words, because she had absolutely no cards left to play. The meeting ended shortly afterward. Eleonora left the room first, alone, without waiting for her lawyer, walking with a stiffness that was no longer pride, but the full weight of a life built on mistaken assumptions. The following weeks were complicated for the entire family. Matteo learned the truth the same night as the meeting, when Camilla finally told him everything from the beginning. Her past in finance, the Aurelia Capital investment, and the coincidence that connected her personal life to the fate of the family company. He remained silent for several minutes, processing the information, and finally said something Camilla had not expected. "All this time I thought I was protecting you from my mother," he said, taking her hands. "But it turns out you never needed protection from anyone. I'm sorry for all the times I didn't defend you when I should have." "I didn't need you to defend me, Matteo," she replied. "I only needed you to see what was really happening, that's all." 3 weeks later, at a much smaller family dinner, with no orchestra, no high society guests and no grand speeches, Eleonora approached Camilla in the kitchen while she was washing dishes. The mansion, without half of its domestic staff, reduced as part of the financial adjustments approved by the board, felt strangely quieter, almost more honest. "What I said that night at the party," Eleonora began with difficulty, like someone who was not used to apologizing, drying her hands on a dish towel she had probably never touched before in her life. "It was cruel, and I was wrong, not because of who you turned out to be afterward, but because even if you had only been a teacher, without any investment fund behind you, I should never have treated you that way. No profession, no surname, gives a person the right to humiliate another." Camilla dried her hands, looked at her, and for the first time since she had known her, saw in Eleonora's eyes something resembling genuine humility, something no money or surname had managed to teach her in 70 years, until she lost for the first time some of her power. "Thank you for saying that," Camilla replied simply. "That's the only thing I really needed to hear." "Do you think that one day we could start over?" Eleonora asked with a vulnerability she had never shown in front of anyone. "We already have," Camilla said, offering her a sincere smile. "Right now." Matteo, who was watching the scene from the kitchen doorway, without fully understanding the magnitude of what had happened during those weeks, simply smiled, grateful that finally the two most important women in his life had found not surrender, but genuine and deserved respect. 1 year later, Eleonora was still part of the company, although in a much more modest role, advising on asset matters without direct decision-making power. The company, under new professional management, had managed to reverse its losses and return to stability. And at every family dinner, without exception, Eleonora found some small, almost awkward way to recognize out loud the value of Camilla's work, not as an obligation, but as something she finally truly felt. Camilla never needed anyone to know who she was in order to feel valuable. But sometimes the world needs proof in order to learn the lesson it should have learned through simple decency.